Hi, ladies. Today we're going to talk about whether you are cleaving to your husbands, whether you are joined to them as the Bible commands. Let's go over the scriptures first, our biblical authority, as usual. And the first one is Genesis 2:24, which reads, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Our second verse is Ephesians 5:31, which reads, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, the two shall become one flesh." In Matthew 19:5, Jesus was speaking to the Pharisees about divorce and said, "Have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let man not separate." Okay, so very quickly here, the main words that appear in these three verses, the main words that we keep seeing over and over here are leave, join, and one flesh. Okay, and it's very interesting when you look at what these words mean in the Greek. The Greek word for leave is exactly what it sounds like. It means to leave behind. Join in Greek is kolao, and it means to cleave, to unite, to adhere. The word origin of this word is from the word kola, which means to glue, to cement, or to fasten together. And the Hebrew word is dekab, which means to adhere or to be joined together. Okay, so in Greek, there's a very big, both in Greek and in Hebrew, these words, there's a very big emphasis on unity, on being glued, joined, fastened, and cemented together. The word "one flesh" is exactly what it sounds like. It's one flesh, one body, and it signifies complete unity. So, uh, Scripture clearly commands us then, when we marry, to leave our family of origin and cleave or join or be glued to our spouse. In this case, since I'm speaking to the ladies, in this case, our husbands. We're supposed to be glued to our husbands. And there is a term here for men who do not leave and cleave. Their society recognizes this behavior as flawed, and we have come up with a term to describe a man who does not leave and cleave to his wife. We call this a mama's boy, and it is never meant as a compliment. Examples of mama's boys are men who depend on their parents, particularly their mothers, deep into manhood. I know men who can't keep a job. They are late to their job. They call in sick when they're not really sick. They don't show up when they're on call. And why do they do this? They do this because they don't fear losing their jobs. They know that if they lose their job, mommy and daddy are going to pay the bills. There's also men who are emotionally enmeshed with their mothers. They're just too emotionally enmeshed with their mothers deep into adulthood. Any little problem they have, any little disagreement they have with their wives, they go running to their mothers so that she can comfort them and tell them that they're good men, that they're in the right, that their wife is a witch, things like that. There's also the type of men who just allow their mothers to completely run their lives and boss their wives around. I have a friend who is a very nice girl, and unfortunately, her marriage ended in divorce because her mother in law, soon after she married, moved into her house with her husband and decorated the entire house to her taste. In other words, the mother in law decorated my friend's new house with her husband. She decorated it according to her own taste as a mother in law. Okay. So, what I'm saying here is that being a mama's boy is wrong. I don't advise you to marry one. Clearly, these men are not leaving and cleaving. But what I'm saying is, when men do it, we have a term for it. We call them a mama's boy, and it's never meant as a compliment. It's a bad term meant to highlight a negative quality in the person. But what do we call women who do that, who won't leave their parents? And the answer is that there is no negative term that society has come up with to label a woman who is still joined to her parents. And just as much as women suffer when men are mama's boys, so too do your husbands suffer, ladies, when you refuse to be unjoined to your parents, when you refuse to leave and cleave, okay? Now, we talked about some of the examples of what a mama's boy looks like, but what does it look like when a woman refuses to leave her family of origin and cleave to her husband? What are some examples of that? I'll give you a few. The first one is allowing your parents to make decisions that belong to you and your husband. Okay, so for example, telling you where to live, where to buy a home, how to run your finances, particularly if your husband disagrees with them or feels pressured. Okay, so let me give you a real life example of this, of someone I know out here in the state that I live in. My friend married a man, and they were getting ready to buy a house, and her parents live out here, but her parents bought their house years ago in a very nice neighborhood for a very cheap price. Okay, now the cost of living, particularly here where I live, has gone up a lot, so people my age can no longer buy homes, at least not right away, in the neighborhoods that their parents are retiring in, because the parents are retiring in much more expensive neighborhoods that they purchased years ago when the homes were cheaper. But her parents pressured them to buy a home near them because they wanted to be close by. They didn't want to let her go. They weren't respecting the boundaries of the marriage. They wanted to be near grandchildren and all that. So she pressured her husband into buying a home in her parents' neighborhood when he wanted to buy a starter home in a different neighborhood. He felt more comfortable that way. They would be able to have a savings. They would be able to travel. And now they're paying off the house, but they're what people call house poor. They're working only to pay the house and hoping that there's isn't an emergency, that one of the cars doesn't break down, that the house doesn't need any repairs, because they don't have any money set aside for that, because they're just living paycheck to paycheck to afford a house in that neighborhood. Okay, and that's going to create some tension in the marriage, because that decision belonged to you and your husband, not to your parents. Your parents can give advice sometimes, but they do not get to make those decisions for you. So, again, that's an example of you allowing someone who's not part of your marriage to influence or make decisions that belong to you and your husband. Number two, allowing your parents to insult or belittle your husband, making him feel as if they're still in control of your lives. An example I can think of here is when a friend confided in me that her parents would make comments about the way they lived, the way she and her husband lived, the way they ran their finances. The parents felt like she should be living a life closer to what they were able to provide for her. But this was a newlywed couple, and the area of schooling that this man was in, he was he was going to be a doctor, but he was still in his residency, so he wasn't making a lot of money yet. And so they were pressuring him and kind of making fun of him for not really being as financially um, well off as they were. And so that's an example of you being joined to your parents, allowing them to make fun of or belittle your husband when you guys are starting off. Okay. Another example is allowing your parents to use you as the problem fixer of the family. Every little problem they face requires your attention, your assistance, your problem solving, and your fixing, which takes away your time and your energy, which belongs to your home. Okay. This is particularly bad when the problems that they're having are problems that are self inflicted, problems that could have been avoided with mature behavior. Okay. So if your parents, for example, are bad with their finances and they're always behind on something, they're always one paycheck away from losing the car, the house, that behavior is their problem. I'm not saying you can't help them if you're willing and able, if you and your husband are willing and able. But if your parents are always making bad decisions, those decisions do not have to affect you and your household anymore because you have left that family of origin and have joined a new household. So again, not saying you can't help when you are able and willing to. I'm saying that if they keep making bad decisions and always calling you and expecting you to be the problem fixer, then you have probably not made it clear that you have left them and that you are now cleaving to your husband, because they shouldn't have that expectation of you. They should understand that you're married, they should respect you and your marriage, and they should either solve their problems on their own or not expect you to solve the problems for them. Another example that's kind of related is allowing them to emotionally dump on you or drama dump on you, taking away, again, your time and your energy, which belongs to your husband and your children. This is particularly bad when it's the same old problems and brokenness that they willingly involve themselves in. Okay, so I don't know, your parents are fighting with your aunt again, or they've started some drama with their neighbors and they're fighting with their neighbors and they're starting to sue each other. If your parents are the type of people that love drama and they thrive in drama and they're always starting problems, and then they expect you to come in and either listen to them while they drama dump on you, or they start emotional fights with other people and then expect you to come in and kind of calm things down, your parents are not respecting the fact that you have left the household and that you are now married and have a new family. They should not be expecting you to be the emotional problem solver of the family. Okay. And notice that every sentence we just discussed, where I said you allowing them to make decisions, allowing them to insult, allowing them to use you as a problem solver, allowing them to emotionally dump on you. Notice that every sentence there includes the words allowing them. And the reason I included those words there is because you hold the key in whether they respect your marriage or not. You allow that behavior and it stops when you say it stops, okay? So if your parents engage in the behaviors that we just discussed, you need to face the fact that you have allowed it, okay? And thankfully there's a solution, even if you have allowed it, okay? And the solution is that you rip off the band-aid. You just rip off the band-aid quickly, and you refuse to join or tolerate behavior that diminishes your new established family, okay? This may be especially difficult, but is even more necessary in families that like to exercise control, dominance, or clingy behavior with their adult married children. Um, Remember the example I gave to you earlier of my friend who's a real person. This is a real story, and who divorced her husband, unfortunately, after many, many years of having problems with the mother-in-law, who would just make every decision for them. By the way, I'm not condoning this divorce. I believe in the Bible, and even if your mother-in-law is super clingy and controlling, that is not a biblical excuse for divorce. All I'm saying is these kinds of issues cause real problems. The divorce rates are high. Talk to any divorce lawyer you know, and the majority of the problems in marriages are either financial problems, or they're problems with the in laws. There's a lot of divorces that come from prolonged long term problems with in laws. Okay, so if you have allowed this behavior in the past, if you have allowed your family to take away your time and your energy, uh, and to cross boundaries that belong to you and your marriage, then forgive yourself, especially if you were young, especially if you didn't know what you were doing. Maybe nobody taught you, maybe your parents didn't tell you, what my mother told me, which is when you grow up and get married, as soon as you can, do your best to get out of the house and start your new life in your own home. She said something along these lines: if you ever need me, I will help you if you guys ever get sick, you lose a job, an emergency happens, we will help. But you and your husband need to do your own thing, live in your own house because that's healthy. You need your privacy, you are your own home. Don't be on top of your in-laws ever. She always told me this ever since I was a young girl. Don't It is not healthy for you to be living with us or with your in-laws, and a lot of people do that to get on their feet. And I personally don't think that that's a good idea. If you have done it because you needed it, you know times can be tough, especially if there's an illness or someone loses a job. I understand, but do your best as soon as you're able to live on your own. Even if you can afford a very small place, it's yours, you're alone, you have privacy, you're able to start building your marriage without any attachments from your family of origin. um, so another thing I've noticed too is that this is very common in Hispanic families, where a lot of people tell their young adult children, hey, you're married, or you're having a child, live with us for as long as you want. And I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that allows the young couple to establish their own foundation and to leave the family of origin. And I think the reason why people do that, I think it's because they don't want to be alone. And I notice in my culture that this is a very big problem, where Hispanic parents don't want to be alone. They like having all their kids live with them. And that's really unhealthy, because then those kids, they never learn how to be financially independent. They never learn how to sacrifice, how to manage their money. So they never grow financially because they're always depending on you. You have a nice basement for them to live in, you have nice cars for them to drive, you take them on vacations, and they never really feel that pressure of having to build something for themselves. They never learn how to sacrifice. And another thing is, they never learn how to operate their own family. They never learn how to leave and cleave because you're on top of them. And I think these people are doing it because they're afraid of being alone. They're trying to avoid the empty nest for as long as they can, but they're doing it selfishly, because it's selfish to do that. You should want your grown kids to move out and start their own families, so that your generations can be healthy and successful and walk in the Lord's ways. So again, if you've allowed this because nobody trained you to do this, nobody told you this was healthy to leave and cleave, forgive yourself for allowing this behavior in the past. And it's never too late to choose obedience to God. Okay, your time and your energy primarily belong to God, to your husband, and to your children. So if anyone, including your parents, is taking away your energy and your time, uh, you have the right to say no. And so, a few tips here before I close the message is, how do you do that? How do you leave and cleave if you've already established a pattern of still being joined to your family of origin? Well, number one is you have to be honest. Okay, say for example, in the example I gave earlier, where my friend's parents were telling her, you need to buy a house in this neighborhood because we want to be near you guys. An example of how you leave and cleave is by being honest and saying, you know what, thank you for your advice, but that decision belongs to me and my husband. Okay, it's that simple. You can straightforwardly and respectfully tell your parents that decision does not belong to you, and you are overstepping when you tell us where to buy a home. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that my friend, the reason she allowed her parents to pressure her is because they were helping them out with the down payment. And that's another thing I tell people is, don't accept money from your parents. If you're grown and you've decided to get married, do it on your own. God will provide. God will help you. Stop asking your parents, especially if you already know that they're controlling, if you already know that they tend to overstep and that they're clingy and that they want to hold on to you for as long as they can, and they're not really respecting the leave and cleave biblical principles. Why would you ask them for money? You're just inviting more control, more clinginess, and more overstepping on their part. And so I know it's hard these days to enjoy life, but God provides. learn to live with what you have. Learn to live with what you and your husband have. You will learn to be content. Yeah, if you both have good work ethics, and if you both apply biblical principles to money, you will save, you will be successful, and you will be where you want to be, years later after you've put in the work. So stop taking money and help from parents who don't know how to respect boundaries. And so I remember giving that advice to my friend when she asked me for it. I said, stop asking them for money. Stop accepting money from them. Stop accepting fancy vacations from them. If you don't feel comfortable telling them not to overstep, because that is one of the drawbacks in taking money from parents, is sometimes they will feel entitled to tell you what to do, and then when you say, well, sorry, but that decision belongs to me and to my husband, they say things like, well, we gave you the down payment. So I told her, stop doing that. And her response was, well, they should be able to help me without overstepping. And to me, that is just, I don't agree with that. Yes, I do think that if you're going to help as a parent, you should still respect boundaries. For example, me, if I ever help my kids, I'm not going to do it to hold it over them. I'm not going to say, hey, I helped you with your down payment, so now I get to tell you where to live. No, of course, I'm not going to do that. But a lot of people do. A lot of people feel entitled to doing that when they give you money. So, use your brain and your discernment that God gave you to recognize whether your parents are that type of person. And I prefer peace. I prefer to be poor. I prefer to live within my means. I prefer to, live within what my husband and I can bring to the table and have peace, and not have someone telling me, well, I give you this and therefore I get to tell you what to do, and be putting my nose where it doesn't belong all day, every day. I prefer peace. So if you agree and you prefer peace, and your parents are like this example I'm giving you with my friend, and stop accepting things from them. Okay, learn to live content with what you and your husband have. So so that's one example of what you can say: that decision belongs to me and my husband. You can also say, when your family calls to drama dump on you, oh, we got in a fight with our neighbors again, oh, we're in a fight with so and so again because we were drunk and we accidentally ran over her flowers with our vehicle. You can say, you know what, I don't have the time and energy to listen to that right now, and I can no longer assist with this problem. When parents call you, and I've heard this again from a lot of people who say, oh, my parents, they expect me to be the problem solver of the family. Here we go, another family member's in jail, another family member got drunk and got a DW, what is it called, DUI, and they expect me to come and help. No, if you're not able or willing to, you can say, I can no longer assist with these problems. This person doesn't learn. This person likes to get in trouble. I am not this person's problem solver. My time and my energy belong to my husband and my children, and I won't be dedicating time to you or this person's problems anymore. You can, and be firm and consistent with those responses. Another misconception that people have when I advise them to do that is, will am I honoring my parents by doing that? Because the Bible does say to honor your parents. And the thing is that, yes, you can still honor your parents, because honoring your parents is completely different um, from maintaining the integrity of your marriage. You can still honor them, you can still be respectful, you can still care for them in old age, you can still be on the lookout for them and help them when they need it, without engaging in all the behaviors that we just discussed. Those things you are not required to do. Okay, and your marriage is the most important relationship in your lifetime. Okay, the word joined, when I first saw that word joined, I was taken aback by that word, because I thought to myself, have I ever seen this word in the Bible before? I've read the Bible front to back. I don't think I've ever seen this word before. And I went back and I searched through, the online dictionaries that let you search for a specific word. And I went back and searched for the word joined, and I never found that word to describe any other relationship other than the relationship between husband and wife. So even a mother and child, okay? Think about it. As women, we grow our children inside our bodies. We give birth to them. We feed them with our breasts. We rock them to sleep. They depend on us for survival. And the word joined, the word glued, is not used ever in the Bible to describe the relationship between mother and child. It's not. The only time the word joined, which means to be glued, the only time that word is used in a relationship description is to describe the relationship between husband and wife. So that's how important it is to God that He meant it to be complete unity. Marriage is complete unity, and there can only be a husband and wife in complete unity. It can't be husband, wife, father in law, mother in law, sister in law, nobody. Nobody should be butting into your marriage, disrespecting it, crossing boundaries, or telling you where to live, telling you how to run your finances, or absorbing all your time and energy. That time and energy belongs to your husband and your children, and your marriage is the most important relationship of your lifetime, affecting aside from your relationship with Christ. I mean, a relationship between normal humans, okay? And the reason why marriage is so important is because it will outlast the length of your marriage. Your decisions, what you do in your marriage, will outlive you, and it will outlive your children. Your marriage and what you do with it will affect the lives of your children's children, and great grandchildren. All your generations will be affected by your marriage and what you did with it. Okay, so if you're afraid, pray to. If you feel like you've been engaging in this behavior and you're afraid of how to set boundaries, remember that we are to fear God only, not man. You can still honor your parents, but they don't belong in your marriage. There is no room for 3 or 4 people in marriage. There's only two, man and woman. Remember that you are to fear God only, and that obedience produces rewards. Okay. In our next video, I'm going to talk about how to take or who to take wise counsel from. Until next time, ladies.